For my next project, I need these PVC pipes and I need them to be pretty colors. So before I can get any spray paint on these, I need to wipe them down with this acetone. I gather there's something on PVC pipes, and once you wipe it down with acetone, spray paint will stick. At least that's what Google told me a while ago. The first thing I need to point out on this video is that, guys, I remembered to put on gloves. I have been doing DIY projects for a decade at this point, and the number of times that I put on gloves is thin. So I remember them here. I am literally just washing this pipe down with acetone. One thing I should note, I've done this in the past and it's removed all the writing that was on the pipe itself. This time it didn't do that. So it definitely got the pipe ready for spray paint. But if your goal is to have a perfectly white PVC pipe, then for me, it didn't do the trick. I think they've started to heat press or something with the labels. I don't know. I looked it up on ChatGPT. It didn't give me any clear answer, but for me, I knew I was spray painting it. So there you go. That's way more information than you ever wanted about the label that is on PVC pipes. This little gadget that I'm using, I got years ago when we were making an outdoor movie screen. It was a partnership with the Home Depot, and we were using PVC pipes, and I needed a way to cut the pipes so my kids could help. And honestly, I have used this ever since. It has sort of like a ratchet effect, so it is not easy on the hands, because I had to do a million cuts, but it's actually pretty good and it works perfectly and there's precision. And on a saw, I just didn't like how the pipe would always fly and there was all this dust. So that's what I use now. I will try to remember to link it in the video description because I think it's sort of a cool tool. I needed so many pieces of pipe in order to make my bracelet look kind of proportional and long enough. So this is me counting how many I can get from one single pipe, desperately hoping that I wouldn't need to cut all three, but spoiler, I did. That was my original sketch. I ended up doing it a couple different times just to make it a little bit skinnier because I was just going through pipes so quickly. Here I am laying them all out. I did do a little bit of math so that I made sure to spray paint the right number for each pipe. There were some colors that needed a lot more than others. So this is me kind of mapping them out. You can see that I have my notebook there. I adjusted it a little bit as I went along, but for the most part, my original sketch is the one that I used. It was sort of a fun reminder of planning out my beaded bracelets way back when. I am grateful that I have an extraordinary stash of spray paint, and so I always just go to that. You can tell that I use the same colors over and over and over again, so I'm pulling my favorites. Various blues, various greens, and then a few sprinkles of pink. I think I had a darker teal that I used, but I don't know. I'm sort of a one-trick pony when it comes to paints. And I will say that when you're using the same brand of spray paint, most of mine are Rust-Oleum because I just get them at the Home Depot. There's only so many to choose from, so I will give myself credit for that. If I were using latex paint and I could go look at every single paint sample in the world, I probably would be doing slightly different combinations, but I don't know. I love what I love. I didn't bother priming the PVC pipe or anything. This is a piece of art. It's gonna hang on the wall. It's not gonna get any kind of interaction or use. So I'm not really worried that the paint sticks perfectly. This is gonna be fine. So you get a sense of some of the colors that I'm using. I just set this up in my garage. I opened the front of the garage a little bit so I don't get fumigated. This is basically my setup. I use tarps and I cover my trash cans and I use cardboard boxes. There wasn't too much overspray because these are pretty small little pieces of pipe, but it definitely took me a while. Some of the paints I use take a little bit longer to dry, so I would say it took me a day or two all in to paint all of the pieces, and it was hard to wait because once I had cut them all, I really wanted to get started making the actual bracelet. If you ever made these bracelets when you were younger, you remember that the loom is a key part of it. Do you remember wrapping the little white strings? There's a name for them, but to set up the loom, that was the most tedious part. So unfortunately, I needed to make a loom. At first, I thought maybe I could get away with not doing one, but obviously that's just how these are made. So I am using just some scrap plywood that I had. This is me screwing in a 1x3, a 1x4, just to give me enough width because I think it ended up being like 9-10 pieces of pipe, so about a foot. And then I'm using the green nylon cord that you see there to make the sort of the basis of the loom. Originally, I was going to use this green cord to actually weave the bracelet, but to weave the bracelet itself, I needed quite a bit of length. And these are long, but they're not that long. So I felt like it was probably better to use these as the loom itself because I didn't need a ton for that. And then you can see that neon thread in the background. I think that's what surveyors might use. So quite a bit comes in a roll, and I already had some of it on hand. And so that's what I'm using to actually weave the beads themselves. So I just used my staple gun and I stapled the green cording onto the piece of board, and then I did wrap it around and staple it again on the back just to secure it. I wasn't sure how much tugging I was going to be doing, and I obviously didn't want my loom to fall apart when I was pulling it. So I don't know if I needed this step, but whatever. I just did it, and that electric stapler makes it really easy. I always listen to books on tape or podcasts when I'm working. My favorite podcasts are Armchair Expert, Smartless. On Tuesdays, I listen to the Handsome podcast. I used to listen to The Office Ladies on Wednesdays, but they've finished the whole series and I sort of haven't kept up with them, so that's on me. Armchair Expert comes out a few times a week, so that's helpful. And then what else I like? Amy Poehler's new podcast. I'm excited to listen to Monica Lewinsky's new podcast. Call Her Daddy, I'll sometimes listen to depending on the guest. So that's what I'm doing whenever you see me working. That's also why you never see me talking to camera in my videos, because I always get sort of sucked into a podcast or a book on tape and I forget to turn that off to talk about what I'm doing. There's some weird phenomena that happens every time I DIY. I literally will run out of materials with one more step to go. So this is me replacing my staples so that I can staple 3 more of those loom cords. Okay, so now it's time to finally start making the bracelet. So I'm tying my little skinny pink string onto the loom. I'm gonna call the green strings on the boards my loom. And then, see that stick? I think this is my kid's stick to clean her flute, but it worked perfectly. It's basically a giant wooden needle. There's like a little hole on one end. I suspect that if you're cleaning a flute, you would put like a microfiber cloth or something through it. But for me, it worked perfectly. If I hadn't had this, I would probably have tied an eye hook onto the end of a wooden dowel to kind of create the same sort of a thing. But like I said, I had this and it worked perfectly. So you can see me following my pattern. You have to go row by row and it's sort of therapeutic to follow your grid. And so this was the pattern I needed for the first row. And just like the beaded bracelets, you can see that I'm making sure that there's one section of pipe between each of the loom ropes. And then you go, how can I explain it? So you go under your loom to begin, and then, I don't know if you just noticed, but then I took my needle and I went back through all those beads along the top. So here I'm doing it again. I'm bringing my beads under the loom here, and I'm making sure that there's one bead in the middle of every rope. And because this is giant, this took just a little bit of maneuvering. And then I'm gonna go back through my beads, but over those loom ropes. So you go under in one direction, then over on the other. And that's what sort of locks them in place onto the loom. I just kept repeating it. I wanna say that this bracelet ended up being like 28 rows, and you can see that I narrowed it down to only 7 columns. I was able to essentially make the pattern that I wanted to. And like I said, I was getting really tired of cutting PVC pipe. And so this sort of achieved the same visual without just going crazy. Here I'm going under the loom, and then you get a better view of it here. I'm going back through along the top. The one thing I wasn't sure about, because these beads are just bigger and they have a larger hole in the middle, they're not quite as tight on that pink rope. Like when I did this as a kid, the string that went through my little seed beads held it in place. The beads couldn't really move around, but you can see that there's a lot of wiggle room. So when I pick this up off of the table, that's one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, but I think there's probably a way I can make it work. But you know, flat on the table, it's looking great. And it's been really fun to see it all come together. And it's totally working. I mean, that pattern looks so cute. So I have to follow my pattern forensically. I only made one mistake because I didn't realize that I had 2 shades of really light blue beads. So at some point I mixed them up. I didn't show it on camera, but that's pretty good for a project to only have 1 or 2 mistakes. So I'll take that as a win. I'm trying to show my projects in real time just to give you a sense of how it sort of goes for me in real life. Sometimes when I see projects sped up, I don't appreciate kind of how methodical it is. And sure, some might say that it's crazy that a grown woman is making a giant bracelet in her garage out of PVC pipes, but it really does make me happy, and I love these funny things. And you will have to wait and see the rest of the video because it looks so cute. It's sort of a fun piece of, I don't know, would you call it folk art? It's just kind of pop art. I love it. I love how I said I was trying to show my projects in real time, and then here's a section that is totally sped up. I will say there's something really satisfying about seeing the pattern come together in this time lapse, so I had to show you this also. I had to remind myself how they finished off the actual bracelet, so I went online, and what it looked like they did is that they just tied, first of all, they took the 2 ropes at a time and they tied a knot. I'm using, I think, what do you call this, a square knot? Sailor's knot, square knot, I think. If for some reason your string is too slippery and it's not holding, I think you can probably do another knot, or you can always just put a little bead of super glue or hot glue and it should hold it in place. But I worked 2 ropes at a time and I just tied knots. And then what they did online is that then they took the next pair. So now they're tying, you know, like 4 ropes together, so on and so forth. I just finished off here. I didn't go ahead and tie the last set together because, I don't know, I just didn't. But I think with bracelets, maybe you do. It doesn't matter. The one thing I didn't take into account was the weight of these beads. So I did the same thing on the bottom of the bracelet. And in hindsight, I wonder if I should have like pressed the beads together more, but I don't know. When I lifted it up, it looks pretty good. You can see that the beads sort of settle down towards the bottom, but for the most part, they're holding their rows, they're holding their shapes. I was most worried that when I picked it up, the whole thing would sort of fall apart. I mean, not literally fall apart, but like the pattern would get sort of shifted, and it kind of didn't. But what I decided to do just to help it keep its shape a little bit is I had some leftover dowels. And so I'm gonna use one to hang the actual piece, but I had some leftover. And so every 2 or 3 rows of the beads, I'm gonna go ahead and insert a dowel just to make sure that that row of beads will stay together. So you can see how it shifted ever so slightly just because of the weight and because there's so much space in the middle of each pipe. I went ahead and I did a dowel. I think I ended up doing every 2 or 3 rows of beads. And it wasn't perfect, but I also didn't feel like I needed to do a dowel in every row. That sort of felt like overkill. To hang it, I decided not to overthink it. So I'm just using 2 picture hooks. And then I used a little bit of that same neon green twine, and I just made like a slip knot, and I'm just hanging the whole thing onto the hooks. So you can see at the top, there's a little bit of space. And so it did take me a few minutes while it was hanging to kind of shift and adjust and pull the beads up. I couldn't decide whether I wanted the beads to be as close to the top as possible. Ultimately, there's a little gap at the top because they just naturally kept sort of falling towards the bottom. So you can see me just pushing into them. And again, I'm sure I could have used like little bits of hot glue. Like there's other things I could have done to keep the beads from slipping out of place. But once they were pressed in, they just kind of held there and they look great. But look, they're all in place. I think it looks so cute. You can see the gap at the top a little bit. I decided to leave the strings because that's sort of how a bracelet would look. It's hanging in our playroom and it's so cute and colorful. I don't know, now I can say I've done it. I thought about using a pool noodle, but I think I'm glad I stuck with the PVC pipes. I like the smooth texture and I think she looks really cute. So there you have it, giant beaded bracelet. Thanks so much for watching these weird little projects of mine. They bring me so much joy. I hope you enjoy them. I have a really fun thing coming up next. I haven't made it yet, but I think I have a plan. So you'll just have to tune in for the next weird project at Charlotte's house. Thanks, guys.